nothing but the truth. Is this a seasonal blip that we should not have to worry much about? Or are we seeing the traditional areas of IT drying up? And is it time for the whole industry, to use a computer term, to reset itself?
The tech industry itself is sort of an inflection point, as I say, right? Because why is it? Because of the fact that the AI and automation, these move to a very core of how business operate. So when you look at the broader trajectory over the next several months, we anticipate significant transitions as organizations pivot towards what we call product-aligned delivery models. So it's going to be a little different from what we've been seeing in the past. And this is driven by the rising client expectations of our industry around agility, innovation, and speed. Before we get all panicky and all of that, it is important for us to know that in the long term, technology will remain a very, very powerful catalyst for growth, any type of growth.
Indian IT firms have traditionally relied on this high volume, low value employee base that soaked up all the outsourcing work that we saw. So is the pyramid that Kirtivasan defined undergoing a huge change? And what is that big change? And
if you look at the industry at large, the hiring trends will continue to evolve, which means that with an increasing demand for deep, specialized expertise is what is required. So there is no, traditionally there was some kind of a one-size-fits-all solution. Each enterprise will have to navigate this in a very, each enterprise will have to navigate this transition based on what is required for their need and so on and so forth. But you're broadly right in the sense that, the days of, taking a very large volume of people from the campuses, training them, etc., will have a little bit of an impact because of the fact that, you do need now folks with higher caliber who can actually deliver this specialized expertise.
Let's look at the storm called Donald Trump, which is sweeping the world and of course has disrupted the Indian shores. And US clients who provide close to 70% of India's IT business are also cutting spending. So the buzzwords have become like billability, which quantifies the value an employee brings to a client. So how much will the impact of Trump's policy?
Tariffs are all based on goods, not on services. But that doesn't mean that there is zero impact on our industry. I mean, when you look at these tariffs, not just on India, but also in other countries, our customer base in the United States will have a little bit of an issue with their discretionary spend, which means that will have an impact on our industry. There are also other what we call non-tariff issues, which is sort of beginning to crop up. And then, so for example, the removal of Dropbox systems, which is what the latest one. You talked about this talent mobility, and that is going to get impacted.
So how much of this AI impact is going to happen in terms of the revenues as well as the employment for the IT sector in India?
Most companies will look at this as an opportunity rather than a threat. The reason is that I think if you're able to deploy AI in a meaningful way, I think the companies can actually do better. I mean, for the longest period of time, this industry has been struggling to sort of not have a linear progression. I mean, the revenues and the number of people were very linear, which means that you have X percentage of growth in revenue, you'll have the same percentage of growth in the employee count. That you will start to see there is going to be a diversion in terms of you could have a revenue growth without having a lot of employee headcount addition in some sense. So what it means is that you're actually being more productive because of the fact that you're able to deploy agentic AI in many ways, which also means that there's going to be a lot more higher level of productivity.
Many people talk of it as the fifth industrial revolution, which emphasizes human-machine collaboration using advanced AI and robotics and Internet of Things. So, as you said, this is an inflection point, a transformative moment in the IT sector. How do you see this particular part in terms of reskilling and university collaborations to ensure that we are at the cutting edge of the software that is required?
I kind of imagine this as a triage, if you may, right? At one end, we have the industries, the other end we have the universities and academia. The third leg of the stool will be the government. So the ability for us to bring these three elements together and then look at the problem was going to be the key.
Hello, I'm Raj Chengappa of India Today and your host for Nothing But the Truth. This is my weekly x-ray of key issues that matter to you without holding back on the truth. The information technology or the IT sector has been one of the primary job creators for India. The country boasts of an IT workforce of 7.3 million. India's IT sector has also been among the fastest growing in the country. From just $30 billion in 2005, the sector has grown to $282 billion currently. That is a phenomenal eightfold growth in just 2 decades. In fact, the sector now contributes over 7% to India's GDP. When it comes to exports, the figures are as impressive. The IT sector accounts for almost 60% of India's services exports, and last year, the IT sector contributed $224 billion of the country's $380-odd billion worth of service exports. That's how important the IT sector is for India. So last month, when Tata Consultancy Services, India's biggest IT firm, announced the largest layoffs ever in its history, it came as a rude shock to India and, of course, the world. TCS laid off as many as 12,000 workers, or about 2% of its entire global staff. That's because they say in the last quarter of financial year 2025, most of the IT giants had seen revenue dips for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic. TCS, for instance, lost 28% of its market value last fiscal, falling from rupees 15.5 lakh crore to rupees 11 lakh crore, and Infosys dropped 19% too. Other IT majors, including the Infosys, which I mentioned, HCL and Tech Mahindra, have also shed jobs or have frozen fresh hiring. In fact, overall entry-level hiring has fallen by half as compared to just before COVID. And if you look at starting salaries, that has been stuck at about rupees 3.5 lakh per annum for almost a decade now. Perhaps never before in its 3 to 4 decades of global prestige has India's IT sector faced such existential panic. So to understand the big churn that is happening in India's critical sector, I'm delighted to welcome at this stage Rajesh Nambiar, the president of NASSCOM, or the National Association of Software and Services Companies, which is India's premium non-governmental trade association for the IT sector. Now, Rajesh is a veteran IT sector professional, and before he took over as president of NASSCOM, he was chairman and managing director of Cognizant Technologies. So, Rajesh Nambiar, welcome to Nothing But the Truth.
Thank you so much, Raj. Thank you for having me in your show. Absolutely a privilege to be part of this.
Thanks, Rajesh. Let's begin by talking about the big churn that I'd mentioned in the IT sector, and that had become starkly evident, as I said, when TCS laid off close to 12,000 employees recently. Let us examine, is this a seasonal blip that we should not have to worry much about, or are we seeing the traditional areas of IT drying up, and is it time for the whole industry, to use a computer term, to reset itself?
I'll give you the broader context. I think, in my opinion, Raj, the tech industry itself is sort of an inflection point, as I say, right? Because why is it? Because of the fact that the AI and automation, these move to a very core of how business operate. So when you look at the broader trajectory over the next several months, we anticipate significant transitions as organizations pivot towards what we call product-aligned delivery models. So it's going to be a little different from what we've been seeing in the past. And this is driven by the rising client expectations of our industry around agility, innovation, and speed. So this shift is fundamentally reshaping traditional service delivery frameworks, which all of us are familiar with. And obviously in the near term, which may lead to some kind of what we call targeted workforce rationalization in some areas, as traditional skill sets are going to be reevaluated. And that's what you're actually seeing it. But I also want to add, before we get all panicky and all of that, it is important for us to know that in the long term, technology will remain a very, very powerful catalyst for growth, any type of growth. We talked about GDP growth of countries, and I believe that every wave of disruption, especially around technology, it brings in new roles, new value chains, new opportunities. So as industries evolve, continuous skilling, upskilling, and cross-skilling will be critical to build this future-ready, resilient workforces.
That's a very interesting point. And I just want to quote what Kirti Vasan of K. Kirti Vasan, the CEO of TCS, said when the layoffs happened. And he said the company is moving away from the traditional waterfall project management, which I think you all define as a linear sequential approach to now what he says a more agile and what you mentioned product-centric model, thereby reducing the need for conventional project and program managers. Now, Indian IT firms have traditionally relied on this high-volume, low-value employee base that soaked up all the outsourcing work that we saw. So, is the pyramid that Kirti Vasan defined undergoing a huge change? And what is that big change, and how will it show up in the coming years?
No, well, I'll not comment on specific companies and their strategies, but if you look at the industry at large, the hiring trends will continue to evolve, which means that with an increasing demand for deep specialized expertise is what is required. So there is no traditionally there was some kind of a one size fits all solution. Each enterprise will have to navigate this in a very each enterprise will have to navigate this transition based on what is required for their need and so on and so forth. But you're broadly right in the sense that the days of taking a very large volume of people from the campuses, training them, etc., will have a little bit of an impact because of the fact that you do need now folks with higher caliber who can actually deliver this specialized expertise, which also means that the industries will have to take a significant step in ensuring that they are able to prepare its talent base for this shift. So, but it's good news is that many of them are already doing this, right? Over 1 million professionals have been trained in AI and generative AI skills across levels. If you take particularly about advanced AI skills initiatives, this is about 75,000 employees in leading listed firms. I mean, and that's the data that we work with. They are covering AI native cloud, embedded AI, applied intelligence certification. So I think the industry is preparing itself to make sure that they're making this shift. But Raj, we should know that not everyone will make this shift. So it is important for us to know that it is also the onus is also on us as employees of various companies, that we have to make this shift from the traditional skill set to the new skill set. And people who make it will have no issues whatsoever in sort of going through that process.
Now, I'm going to come to AI, a more in-depth discussion with you. But before that, let's look at the storm called Donald Trump, which is sweeping the world and, of course, has disrupted the Indian shores, as we've seen, in terms of the tariffs that he's imposing. Now, Indian IT companies had virtually to stop hiring senior managers right after Trump returned to the White House in January because the signals were not good. And US clients who provide close to 70% of India's IT business are also cutting spending. So the buzzwords have become like billability, which quantifies the value an employee brings to a client. So how much will the impact of Trump's policies, especially on workforce mobility and his MAGA or Make America Great Again slogan, begin to impact India's IT industry?
So one is, if you purely look at the tariffs at this point in time, as you know, the tariffs are all based on goods, not on services. So, but that doesn't mean that there is zero impact on our industry. I mean, when you look at these tariffs, not just on India, but also on other countries, our customer base in the United States will have a little bit of an issue with their discretionary spend, which means that will have an impact on our industry. Even though it's a little bit of an indirect impact, certainly there will be an impact in the long term if this continues. But we are hoping that that won't be the case. Sooner or later, I think we will end up having a bilateral trade agreement with the United States, which will be closed in a few days. So that means that hopefully that is going to be behind us. But as you said, there are also other what we call non-tariff issues, which is sort of beginning to crop up. And then, so for example, the removal of Dropbox systems, which is what the latest one, I think from September 1st or so, they said, there won't be a Dropbox system. So you talked about this talent mobility, and that is going to get impacted. So this will cause delays for months for companies to sort of make sure that they're able to get people to go there, work with the client systems and then come back and do some of their broader development in India. All of that pattern of what we call talent mobility using some of the work visas. We are not too concerned about the immigration and the green card and all of that. We'll stay away from that type of discussion. But for our industry, what is important is the talent mobility. We want to separate this from the immigration discussion. But when you look at purely the talent mobility, I think that there, if this continues, there certainly will be some impact. But, you know, uh, it is par for the course in some sense, Raj. What happens is that, we've learned to live with some of these. We have seen the Trump 1.0, and I think the industry was very resilient, actually came out a little better at the end of the day. And in most companies, if you really see, they've accounted for or are planned for some level of disruption in the talent mobility. So our dependency on such mobility visas, such as H-1B, etc., has come down significantly from an industry point of view. It's not as high as it was 5 years ago. If you had asked me this question, if there is a big impact on H-1B, the world will be very different. The world for the tech industry would have been very different. But today, I think it's largely accounted for. Yes, it will cause some disruption, but will it be a disaster? The answer is no. This will be something which we can manage.
Let's come to the AI question, and we've seen the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence or AI, particularly the deployment of large language models or LLM technologies that it's called, and trained on a vast data sets of text and code earlier, which was done manually, but these powerful AI systems can perform a wide range of natural language processing tasks. And that has significantly been positive. It's boosted productivity for individuals and organizations alike. So no one's against that particular development. But it is estimated that close to 30 to 50% of the traditional IT software sector skills could be automated in the future. So how much of this AI impact is going to happen in terms of the revenues as well as the employment for the IT sector in India? And what is the IT sector doing to prepare for this onslaught that could come in from AI?
I don't know whether I would call it an onslaught, but I think it's a tradition. It's a very if most companies will look at this as an opportunity rather than a threat. The reason is that I think if you're able to deploy AI in a meaningful way, I think the companies can actually do better. I mean, for the longest period of time, this industry has been struggling to sort of not have a linear progression. I mean, the revenues and the number of people were very linear, which means that you have X percentage of growth in revenue, you'll have the same percentage of growth in the employee count. That you will start to see there is going to be a diversion in terms of you could have a revenue growth without having a lot of employee headcount addition in some sense. So what it means is that you're actually being more productive because of the fact that you're able to deploy agentic AI in many ways, which also means that there's going to be a lot more higher level of productivity. So that's number one. And then when you look at the future, and we believe, as I said, while they're able to rationalize the workforce, ability for the companies to shift into the new area, most of the employees will make the cut and transition it over, but there will always be someone who do not fit into the new world, right? And that becomes a bit of a challenge. So it means that industry has to, and they've already taken the steps, as I mentioned before, training them into the new areas, right? So you got to be having those capabilities, whether AI or generative AI capabilities. So the industry has begun this broader skilling of 1 million people. Then, of course, there's a very focused skilling on some of the specific areas. We talked about embedded AI, native AI cloud, applied AI intelligence. So all of this is going to be very, very critical for us to make the transition. So this is some high-end capability, some broad capability. And then when you look at the future, you will find that, there is certainly a revenue growth for the companies, but the employee growth will not be too far behind. You'll still have hiring will evolve. There will be increased demand for some of the deep, sophisticated, specialized expertise that we'll continue to see, but there's not going to be the kind of hiring that you saw in the past.
I'm going to come to this point that you made about reskilling and the fact that you need newer skills to handle the entire AI invasion, or whatever term you'd like to call it. But before that, let's talk about the contrast we have seen with the rise of these, what we call the global capability centers, or the GCCs, where foreign majors directly now employ close to, I think, 1.8 million people in India. They seem to be operating on a higher up in terms of the value chain in software development and AI-driven analytics and innovative R&D. So where do you see this system going? The GCCs, would they replace in terms of the employment, they will absorb a lot of the people that are being shifted out from the traditional IT sector, or where will GCCs take us?
So Raj, if you look at 2 years ago, this industry was sort of the Wall Street darling, as they call it. And so we were growing at double digit and so on and so on. So for the last about, I would say, 8 or 9 quarters, you didn't see that growth. And we were at best maybe a mid-single digit type of an industry. But when you peel the onion and look at not as an industry, but look at individual groups within the industry, you have the service providers, then you have GCCs, then you have ER&D folks, then you have BPO companies, then you have startups. So when you look at all of that, clearly there is no question that the GCC segment has grown the fastest. So they've been able to. So today we have roughly 1,750 GCCs in India already, and then we will go to a much higher number. And the rough numbers are about 1 to 2 GCCs are being set up in India every single week. That means in a year we roughly get about 100 GCCs being added to the mix, which is a big number.
Right.
And then we've had multiple conversations with the government, with the individual companies, with the larger ecosystem to make sure that they're getting the ease of doing business. They should be able to come to India. So we work on their transfer pricing agreements, we work on their taxations, we work on making sure that they're actually able to do really, really well. The good news, Raj, is that across the board, from the central government to the state governments, very, very eager to welcome them with both arms. I think we do everything possible to make sure that they're able to come in, set up their shops, the ability for them to sort of begin some process, whether it is a real estate related issues or whether it is the taxation, whether it is establishment of companies, hiring, all of that, we make it easy for them so that they can actually do a good business. Now, will they replace all the, when you look at, they have been adding more people in the last couple of years than the service providers. So if you take the net addition in the GCCs, actually has been higher than the net additions in the service provider segment. And that's okay, because as I mentioned before, we will go through some kind of a turf before we really begin the growth. And I mentioned to you before, when you look at a little bit more into the future, maybe 2 years down the line, we believe that this is going to be a much better situation for the industry because of the fact that everything that we do in the world will be around technology. You could be in healthcare, you could be in media, you could be in manufacturing, you could be in banking, but this will be driven by technology. So the influence of technology, especially the new age, artificial intelligence or agentic AI or all of that is going to be that much more in the user segments, the other industries, which means that you need technologists. So there is no question, but this industry will grow leaps and bounds, and the ability. So we'll go through the little bit of turf, and then the growth is going to be very, very high. GCC is a great example. So they have been setting up these. Now, you could also argue saying that with all the tariff discussions and what you're seeing from the US, will there be a little bit of a wet towel put on some of this? So far, we haven't seen anything. I think the fundamental nature of how this is being set up, because remember, these GCCs are coming to India not just for cost arbitrage anymore. This is for innovation. This is for capability building. This is not the traditional way of, okay, let's sort of let them do the mess for less type of a situation. It is actually very high end. They file patents. They're actually doing some really high end work in India. So the nature of these GCCs and how much they actually are able to influence the parent organizations and the ability for them to add value. I used to say this in a different way, Raj. So there was a time when the GCCs were focused on cost, but today it is no longer a cost discussion. It's about revenue discussion, which means they're able to provide that kind of value to the parent company, which means that they're able to grow the revenue. The parent companies are able to look at this as a revenue driver, not just a cost driver. So that's a big difference. So I'm very, very bullish on what we could do in GCCs. NASSCOM is doing a lot of work in terms of ensuring that as an industry, we are able to bring in these organizations. They bring in expertise, they demand expertise, so they create a very, very nice mix of the talent which actually goes around, in terms of they work for some time in a service provider. They get a lot of experience in a particular industry vertical. GCCs also give us the industry vertical expertise. If you're a banking GCC, then you bring in those banking expertise, right, capital markets and so on and so forth. If you're healthcare, you bring those expertise. So phenomenal addition to this industry in many ways.
And finally, let's also look at what we talked of earlier, which is the skill development or reskilling that's there. And both the Indian IT and the university system that we have feeds it with a workforce. And therefore, there's now, as you were pointing out, a need for a vastly deeper definition of their fundamentals in the way they're being trained. And if you look at, you talked of the nature of information technology and the rapid change it's bringing about, many people talk of it as the fifth industrial revolution, which emphasizes human-machine collaboration using advanced AI and robotics and Internet of Things. So, as you said, this is an inflection point, a transformative moment in the IT sector. How do you see this particular part in terms of reskilling and university collaborations to ensure that we are at the cutting edge of the software that is required?
It's a fantastic point. I think we always, I kind of imagine this as let's have a triage, if you may, right? At one end, we have the industries, the other end, we have the universities and academia. The third leg of the stool will be the government. So the ability for us to bring these three elements together and then look at the problem was going to be the key. Traditionally, we've always worked about how do you make sure that there is the skill gap? How do you bridge the skill gap with the people when they graduate? When they come to the industry, especially in the IT service sector, they have to go through a lot of training. You're familiar with the fact that most of the IT companies, the tier one companies, I don't want to name any of them, but all of them have very laborious, long gestation training process for the graduates, whether you're a master's or a bachelor's. Before you get into be productive in the industry, you have to go through this training, if you may, right? But that's no longer the norm. You got to be industry ready when you come out of the university. So number one. Number two, but that was the problem we were dealing with. Now, unfortunately, the issue is that the universities have sort of over-indexed on the computer science related topics, while it is still okay, but they need to pivot into saying that, can they also balance it out a little bit between, you do need domain capabilities. You do need people who understand civil engineering, mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, whatever it is, right? You have to do that as well. So many colleges have gone from having 10-20% computer science related course to 70%. That may be a little bit of an overkill. And when you look at the future and what is required in the agentic era, you will also want to make sure that there's a balance in terms of what you're really educating them on. So we have a big task from NASSCOM to bring these two ecosystems together, ensuring there's enough government support. We work with folks like AICTE, UGC, and so on and so forth, to make sure that we get into the university systems, to make sure that they're having the right kind of focus on what is the future capabilities that we need to create from the education system. And the industry should also be participating in these, because Raj, I think in the education systems, you can only do so much if you don't have practical knowledge, if you don't have those internships that you're going to be with the companies. And today, many companies hesitate to do a lot of internship. We do internship, but in a very limited way. So this is the challenge that we have, to sort of bring in these three elements I talked about: industry, academia, government, and then making them work together to sort of solve this problem for the country and for the industry. Because this is not going to be an easy task at all. But we need to work together to make sure that we are able to look at the future, not 1 year, 2 year down the line, but 4 or 5 years down the line. Because the education system there's a bit of a lag in terms of, you make some changes, it takes time for it to reflect in the industry setup. So we're working on this. It's a great problem to solve.
Thank you, Rajesh Nambiar, for these very incisive and succinct insights. As you put it, this is an inflection point that is there, a huge challenge for the IT sector. It has shown its robustness and its resilience in the past, but it needs to keep up with the pace of change and prepare for it. A significant portion of revenue from IT companies will shift from what the current run of the business is to transformational work that you talked about, which has changed the business and will take on all a new shape. So if the IT giants want to remain, as we used to call them, the sultans of software, they need to shape up, or unfortunately, many of them would have to be shipped out. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we will continue to be resilient, Raj. I can guarantee to you that this industry will continue to be resilient. We've been resilient, we'll continue to be resilient. So thank you for having me.
We keep our fingers crossed. You've been our biggest employment generator. Keep doing that. Thank you very much, Raj.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye. For more details, do read India Today's in-depth cover story on the subject by my colleagues MG Arun and Ajay Sukumaran in the latest issue. Thank you for being with me in this episode of Nothing But the Truth. I look forward to having you with me next week. Nothing But the Truth.